Surf Splendor.
Here we are.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll give you a proper introduction in post-production so we can just kind of roll into casual conversation.
Sounds good.
And you have veto power at the end too. Like if, speak freely, and then if you feel like you said something you wish you hadn't, let me know and I can edit it out after the fact.
I'm not worried. I have nothing to hide.
Okay, cool. I love to hear that. Happy birthday, first of all.
Thanks.
How old are you?
57.
Awesome. How'd the golf game go?
I'm going on 12.
Yeah.
The golf game, I didn't play that good, but that's okay.
Why is that okay? Is it all about just having fun nowadays? You're not keeping score anymore?
No. I played like my best golf I've ever played in my life, right leading up to it. And then just the nerves got me, you know what I mean? And it's just one of those things. It's like, you have to be okay with whatever outcome you get, Golf's the raddest thing ever because it totally mirrors life perfectly. And so you have to be okay with whatever happens, you know what I mean? And you watch people's behavior on the golf course and it'll tell you a lot about what kind of person they are, you know what I mean? And so I try to practice that on what I'm playing, you know what I mean? Just like you have to make it about the three people you're playing with more than yourself.
Interesting. Yeah. Say more about golf mirrors life.
So you have good days and you have bad days. You have good shots, you have bad shots. You get good breaks and you get bad breaks. And the longer you play, you start to realize that it's more about your behavior on the course, and that you really start to see different. You want to figure out what kind of person you want to be. You know what I mean? You want to be that guy that everyone remembers and they're like, fuck, I don't want to play with that guy. You know what I mean? That guy's a nightmare on the course. He's only happy when he's hitting good shots, when he's hitting fairways and greens. He's only fun to play with. And then if he's playing bad, he's a nightmare. Like, I don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? And when I was first starting to play golf, I used to break clubs and throw wiggers. And it was like, you go home at night and you're like, wow, nobody really cares what you shoot or if you made birdie on that hole or triple bogey. Nobody cares, but they'll all remember you being an idiot. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
So I learned that very early into my golf career and started to figure out what kind of person I wanted to be. You know what I mean? And so you have to be more even keel than ups and downs. And I'm also attracted to people that are fun to play with, you know what I mean? And so that's who you end up calling, because you can only play golf with 4 people.
Right.
And, most of us have lots of friends and acquaintances. And so you start to really, seek out those people that are fun to be around.
So is that to say, as you relinquish those anxieties or pressures or whatever, that you're enjoying golf more, obviously, but are you getting better at it?
I'm definitely getting better at it. You start to learn how to be okay with your swing instead of trying to learn the perfect, pretty golf swing. You own your own swing, and then you learn how to play with course management, which means that if you hit a bad drive and you're 250 yards out, you're not trying to rip 3-wood as hard as you can to try to get to the green. You'll hit, a wedge and then another wedge onto the green and try to make your par. And that's the smart way to play golf, you know what I mean? And once you learn these little intricacies of course management, then you don't have meltdown holes. You might make a bogey or 2 or 3 bogeys, but you can make up for them with a birdie on the next hole. But when you try to hit hero shots, usually you end up with big numbers more often than not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, I learned that from watching a lot of golf on TV. You know what I mean? You see these guys, they're not trying to hit some shot low percentage shot. They never do. Very, very rarely.
It seems like something you can also get better at the older you get for all of those reasons. I mean, I guess there is some athleticism or, your body has to hold up, but it's a lot less rigorous on your body than skating, let's say. Skating has a certain timeline to it,
For sure. For sure.
So it also feels like there's parallels to surfing with a lot of the things that you just said, like, because a lot of those, I don't know, more spiritual aspects of it of surfing, I didn't identify when I was young, but the older I get, the more I settle into exactly what you're talking about. It's like definitely not trying to rip anymore, just trying to appreciate the time in the ocean and the time in the sun. And if I get a good wave, that's just a bonus. And by virtue of doing all of those things, my surfing has gotten infinitely more refined,
Yeah. And also, you go out with less expectations, the waves come to you. It's like you just want it, like you said, you wanted to be in the sun and watch the dolphins swim by or whatever. And then the wave's just a bonus. And then all of a sudden, because you're not trying so hard, everything just comes naturally. You know what I mean? And it's like trying to surf. If you're trying too hard in surfing, you're going to battle it. But if you're just trying to get in trim and use the power of the wave, usually things come easier and you surf better.
And if you have 20 or whatever years worth of experience and muscle memory of like actually doing the, getting up to your feet and going down the line, all of that, that helps too. But relinquishing the ripping part goes a long way.
For sure.
Let's go back to the beginning. I always thought of you as a Santa Cruz guy, but you didn't grow up in Santa Cruz.
Nope. I was born in LA down there. Where are you, by the way?
Just inland from Huntington Beach a little bit.
Okay.
But I was born in Long Beach.
I was born in West Covina.
Okay.
And we moved to Saratoga when I was 4 years old. And I grew up in Saratoga from the time I was 4 until I was 17. And then I was just out of there. Like I was already mentally out of there before that. But I moved when I was 17. I moved to Santa Cruz and I got a job in Capitola, and just that's when real life started.
What were your parents? What took your parents to Saratoga?
My dad was, well, both my parents were the raddest ever, but my dad was like at the forefront of some of the first computer companies. This is way before Apple, and he worked for a company called Beckman, and then Varian, and then he got hired by Hewlett-Packard, and he worked directly with Bill Hewlett and David Packard, and they moved him up here, and and then he worked for them for years, decades, and then started his own computer company.
What was the name of, or what did he do exactly, and what was the name of his company?
His company was called Nelson Analytical, and they ended up merging later on with PerkinElmer. But he worked for Hewlett Packard directly with them, so he was kind of like one of the underling, like kind of a VP. And he was always I remember so many conversations with him telling me about how rad that David Packard was and how he was just always for the people and conservation and like all this rad stuff, and he really thought a lot of them. And he loved working with them, but there was so much stress involved in that job. He was like, if I don't get out of here, I'm gonna have a heart attack. So he ended up starting his own company and did a lot of consulting over in Europe and Zurich and all those places. And he was a pretty smart man. He grew up from nothing. Both my mom and dad did, and he grew up in like Ventura and Oxnard part of his life, and I think that the people who grew up with nothing turn into the biggest grinders. He did like a year of logging and working in the forest, and making sure that they did the logging in the right way, where they were planting trees and after they were done. And like, anyway, he was always that kind of guy. Then he worked a year in an orange juice plant where they were making orange juice out of oranges and
Wow.
you know, stuff like that. And then, you know, he continued his education, and him and my mom met in University of Minnesota.
Mm.
And you know, that was back in the days when they would meet in the cafeteria and share a meal because they didn't have any money. You know, it was crazy, the stories that I heard.
For listeners who don't live anywhere in California, maybe they're not aware that when people talk about Santa Cruz and all the moneyed influx of billionaires moving into Santa Cruz, so
Yeah,
much of it is related to Silicon Valley, which is just
yeah,
inland, and Saratoga is kind of an offshoot from Silicon Valley where a lot of people lived and companies were founded. I went to a wedding. The only time I've been there was probably 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and it was for a wedding. I had never heard of it before, but it was such a beautiful, cool little small town, and it had already been influenced by that tech influx.
yeah,
But I was thinking about, like, what was this town before that tech influx? Because it's like in the middle of the redwoods. It's quaint. It looks like something you would see in a movie that's set in Minnesota or something.
yeah.
But then it's got the beach, of course, just over the hill. So it seemed like a really idyllic place. I mean, growing up there, I would imagine it'd be cool.
It was, you know, back when I was really young, um, you know, we had a school right down the street. It's now paved over and turned into houses, but there was all kinds of trees. We'd go climb trees, and we had orchards everywhere. We had cherry orchards and plums, and all these orchards that we'd go build jumps and ride our dirt bikes in and stuff like that. Stuff's all gone now, you know what I mean? Um, it was a cool town. The high school was really gnarly, you know what I mean? It was a million miles away from the high schools here in Santa Cruz. You know, it was like very, very lots of rules, lots of stuff, you know, and I was like a rebel, so it didn't mesh with me at all. I was constantly in trouble. I got kicked out freshman year, had to go to a continuation school, and
Wow.
it's kind of famous for that, you know, it's famous for being uh, pretty rule,
Strict.
pretty strict, very strict.
Yeah. What was your rebellion about? What were you rebelling against, and what'd you get kicked out of school for?
I don't know. Um, we had a huge group of friends. There was like 60 of us. We all ran around together, and we were all surfers and skaters, and you know, rebelling. I guess we were rebelling against anybody trying to tell us how to dress, how to be, who to be, what to be. You know, the quo pro or whatever. Like, you know, 4 years in high school, 4 years in college, get a suit and tie, go get a job. Like, we were over that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We wanted to listen to reggae and punk rock and go mosh around and be who we wanted to be, not who the system wanted us to be, you know. And you know, back in the day, Santa Cruz was all about that. You know, I mean, it was like the hippie era lasted here longer, and I don't think they ever had one in Saratoga. Or if they did, I never saw any of it. But I'm sure they did actually, but it was before my time.
Before the tech money came in.
Before the tech came later, you know, when I was growing up. The tech came like right when I was leaving, basically.
Okay.
I mean, majorly. It was definitely beginning when I was growing up there, but when it exploded was actually after I was already gone.
How'd you discover surfing?
Oh yeah, so I started skateboarding at a really young age, and me and my friends, we'd all skate, and we would drain pools and skate pools, and we would skate Winchester Skate Park. And some of my friends started surfing like in middle school, and I didn't. And I was still skating, so I was the guy who'd take the bus to the skate park by myself and go skate. I wanted to get good at skating, you know. Basically, I was a little bit behind all my friends, so they all skated earlier, and then when they got done skating, I was just starting to get good at skating, but they were surfing, and so I was still trying to get good at skating. And then I came in after they had a full year of surfing. I started, and was instantly addicted to surfing.
Considering your distance from the beach, how are you getting to the beach to discover surfing?
Saratoga's not that far. It's like 25 minutes with no traffic, which there was no traffic back then.
Okay.
This is in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Still not easy. It's not like you can skate down the street to the beach like you can here.
Right.
But I've always considered myself a manifester. So it was like, as soon as I got addicted to surfing and skating, there was nothing that could stop me. You know what I mean? And so I'd hitchhike to the beach. I would take the bus by myself or with a friend. And that was actually the year that changed my life, was the 82-83 storm of 82-83. And it built the sandbar at the river mouth, which was the best sandbar in history. And it lasted all year long, all the way through the summer. And so we didn't even need to go anywhere else. I'd just take the bus downtown, take my surfboard off, walk down to the beach. I would actually change into my wetsuit at the Dream Inn in this little, I found this little like cubby hole where I could stash my clothes, and I would change my wetsuit, walk down to the river mouth and surf all day, and then take the bus home or hitchhike. Some days I'd get home at like 8:00 at night. My parents would be like, "Where have you been?" I'd be soaking, you know what I mean? Or I'd be like, they could see I'd been surfing. They're like, "How'd you get over there?" I'm like, "Oh, I took the bus," Anyway, that year changed my life because, first of all, I got to experience the best sandbar of all time. Second of all, I got to figure out who my heroes were, which was Anthony Rufo and Big Bird, which is Dave Schmidt, Richard Schmidt's brother, and Nacho Lopez, and all the goofy foots in town. We all surfed the left. It was like a perfect peak at the river mouth, and every wave it was in the exact same spot, and it would just go all the way to the beach. And it was such a big sandbar. It was all the way at like out at the end of the wharf is what you were looking at when you were sitting out there. Perfect right on this side, perfect left on this side, all the goofy foots over here, all the regular foots over there. And it was just like every day. So, I got to watch the best surfers in Santa Cruz surf, and that's who I wanted to be at that time. You know what I mean? And I was already like a student of the game. So I already had pictures of Buttons and Larry Bertelman and Sean Thompson and all those guys all over my walls. And I was like getting better really fast at surfing,
Yeah.
And
Did any
so
of
it
sorry.
gave me the drive. It gave me the drive to figure out at that point what I wanted out of life, which was to be a good skater and surfer. That's all I wanted.
Did any of those guys that you mentioned have a profile outside of Santa Cruz at all at that point?
Rufo did. He won the Coldwater Classic sometime around that time. I mean, he had already had photos in this magazine, and very early on, they did the very first trip to Puerto Escondido with Chris Klopf and Richard Schmidt and Vince Collier and all those guys who were the Steamer Lane heavyweights. They were all on that trip. And so not only did that portray hard charging Santa Cruz guys, but it also brought attention to guys like Rufo and Dave Schmidt and all these guys who were big names in Santa Cruz. There were so many of them. We had some of the best surfers in the world for sure, you know, Ward Coffey and Bud Miller, and like there was just so many of them that, you know, and it was intimidating. You'd go surf the lane, you're like, wow, like
Yeah.
how would I ever get a wave out there, you know? Jeff
Yeah.
Spencer and all these guys who just charged and ripped.
Was Rufo riding Rusties back then?
I don't think so. That was before the Rusty
Okay.
days.
Because it's
Maybe
interesting, like
Rick
when you're
Noe's maybe.
okay, when you're in an hotbed or like an epicenter like that, it's interesting. You're looking up to Buttons and the guys you mentioned on your wall because they have obviously media attention because they're
Yeah.
from Hawaii or they won a world title in the case of Sean Thompson.
Yeah.
But to be honest, the surfing that was going on in your area was every bit as good. It just wasn't known around the world until,
Yeah.
you know, Tony Roberts publishes a
Yeah.
video about it. And then you see it side by side and you're like, holy cow. And those guys up there have a big wave and they have barrels and they have everything, point breaks. Like there was a lot going on there that had it happened in a later era, like now when there's media everywhere and Instagram accounts, it would have been huge, you know?
Well, that's why TR was so important, because I got to hang out with TR for like that really important decade of my life, which was from 17 to today. But that first decade was like life changing because I got to watch him and his work ethic of like waking up at the crack every day and shooting basically until dark. And he was shooting video, he was shooting stills, he was working for the magazine, he was making movies, he was always creating, always frothing, always surfing, and always skating. And he was really good at surfing and skating. He had all the angles, and he wasn't afraid of people's boards hitting him. You know what I mean? And so he was up close and in people's face with the action, and which most people at that point weren't at that level yet. So he did everything for this town, you know, at that point. You know, there was a lot of photographers here, but no one was doing what TR was doing.
Yeah. Getting in the water, the pole cam, all that kind of stuff.
All the fisheye stuff, all the in your face stuff, and also waking up at the crack of dawn. You know, I mean, it's like, I don't know if people understand how hard it is to get a crew of surfers up at the crack of dawn and then get to the spot for that morning light. It's really hard. You know what I mean? Like Flame was the king down there. TR was the king up here. But the surfers' work ethic changed to meet TR's work ethic because they knew that if they shot with them, they were going to get A, parts in the video, and B, photos in the magazine. You know what I mean? And I remember distinctly his house on 34th Avenue. The whole wall was full of published photos. You know what I mean? It was Loya and it was Skin Dog and it was everyone, Galley and Adam and you know, it was just a sign of how hard he frothed to help these surfers and to help our town get on the map.
Yeah. And that's why I was asking about Rufo's profile beyond Santa Cruz early on, because you said A, video part, B, photos in the magazine, but C is money. Like once the money comes in, you realize, oh, I can actually do this for a living.
Yeah.
You know, which I don't know was an option prior. That will motivate you to get up early.
Yeah. I don't think in the 80s anyone was making big money yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not even the top guys in the world were making big money yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even like Dane Aloha and all these guys, they would get like a check for $2,000 for winning a contest or whatever. You know what I mean? You can't live very long on $2,000.
Yeah.
But all that changed in the early 80s. You know what I mean? Pretty soon it was like, well, I can get $1,000 from Black Flies, and I can get $1,000 from Rusty, and I can get $1,000 from these guys, and O'Neill's going to give me $2,000, and all of a sudden you're making $10,000 a month. And people watched, and everyone was so competitive here in Santa Cruz. People, you know, they learned how to get shoe sponsors and sunglass sponsors and all this stuff, and it was like, it just exploded. And, you know, I watched TR and how he did it and what lenses he was using and all that stuff. So I learned a lot from him. Yep, kind of everything actually.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, how did your parents feel about you leaving Saratoga and embracing that rebellion that you had in your youth?
Well, I think they were relieved because I found a passion, A, and B, it was obvious from day one that I wasn't a good fit in Saratoga. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to conform to that way of life, you know. I wasn't going to get a job at a computer company or any other job probably at that point, you know.
Yeah.
It took me a while to figure out what, you know what I mean, what I wanted to do with my life. It's not like I moved here and became a photographer right away. That came way later, 12 years later.
Right. So what did you do for money when you moved to Santa Cruz?
I got a job in Capitola, and I worked there, and you know, just like bussing dishes and all that kind of stuff. And you know, after that, my next job was I helped a friend of mine open Pink Godzilla restaurant, and that was a sushi bar here. And I worked there with my sister Kim, and that was fun. You know, we'd work all night, and then the owner would make us dinner, and we'd all sit around and talk and chat and whatever.
Yeah. Did you have any ambitions, or did you?
I didn't, you know, like my whole ambition, you know, I got sponsored really early in skateboarding. Like when I was 15 years old, I went down to a trade show in Long Beach and brought my portfolio. I had all kinds of photos of me skating pools and doing airs and whatever. And like I started getting sponsored, and so I rode that out as long as I could, you know, the sponsored professional skateboarder thing. And we did demos, and we got flown around to do demos and stuff like that. But like the writing was on the wall, you know, I mean, I was not going to be the next Tony Hawk or whatever, you know,
Yeah,
obviously. So the photography thing was the biggest gift ever for me because I was good at it, and it got me excited, you know, to do something. And shortly after I got my first really good shot, it got published. And as soon as I got that first photo published, it was on.
So what year was that? And tell me the story behind that image.
Can we pause for a sec?
Of course.
Or can I just run? I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, leave it on. Leave it on.
Okay.
So tell me about the first image that you sold and the story behind it, how that happened.
Oh, it's a long, confusing story, I guess. My mom gave me a camera. I actually have it right here somewhere. Oh, it's right here. She gave me this camera when I was 9 years old, and I shot a roll of film on it, and we didn't get it developed for like 4 months. And I remember it had 12 shots on it. I finally finished the roll. We brought it in, and you know, 2 weeks later, we got the photos back. And I remember getting the photos back, and I was like, even though all the photos sucked, it was cool because the photos that I was looking at were 4 months early. It had like frozen time. And if it wasn't for those photos, I would have completely forgotten about that, what I had shot, you know what I mean? But since I had shot it, now I had this memory. And it was the very first time that like concept took place in my brain, and I was totally stoked on it. And so from that point on, I always had a camera. And, you know, I'd go through times where I wouldn't shoot a photo for a year. And then I'd go through times when I'd shoot 10 rolls in a month. And I never shot professional film or anything like that. I just always shot print film, and I'd get the prints back, and I'd make photo albums out of it and whatever. And then, you know, later on in life, I started shooting a lot, and I was still surfing and skating like mainly, but I'd bring a camera with me on a trip to mainland Mexico or whatever, and I'd shoot a bunch of film and bring it back and develop it, make these albums, and shortly after that, I bought a camera and a water housing, and I started shooting. And I remember TR coming over and looking at some of my water shots, and he was like, "Wow, dude, you're getting some kind of couple cool, sick shots here, you know?" And he's all, "You should really be shooting slide film." Because if you ever get the magic shot of one of the boys, you're not going to be able to do anything with it. And
so can you explain what the difference is?
Well, yeah, I can.
I mean, we've all seen what a slide looks like. Yeah, there you go.
Slides right here. So this is my slide table, and these are slides. Whoa, where's the camera?
I got you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
so is it just a higher quality image that it nets?
It's higher quality film, and it's way higher quality, actually, way sharper. And it's also something that they can easily use to scan for magazines, which was all about the magazines, you know. It's a shame that the magazines are mainly gone now, but so I started shooting slides, and shortly afterwards I did a submission to Surfing Magazine, and I took my camera to see, there's so many phases of this, but I went to Reunion Island, and I took my camera there, and I shot a bunch of slides. I brought them back. I didn't submit them right away. Then I started shooting water shots here, and I did a submission to Surfing Magazine, and I sent a bunch of the photos of the boys here in Santa Cruz to Surfing Magazine, and I threw that one of Reunion in there, and it was like this lineup shot of this perfect wave with like a lawn and a couple, you know, Reunionese houses in the foreground with this perfect left grinding and a barbecue. And they ran it as the poster in Surfing Magazine, like a pull-out poster. And I was like hooked right then. It was like, okay, it's on. You know what I mean? And I think I got a check for $500, and I was like stoked.
Wow. What year was that?
It was in the 90s. I'm not sure, like 93, maybe 95. I'm not sure.
Okay. Got it.
So at that point, exactly when that thing was getting published, I had already gotten to the next level of like starting to shoot with the pros here in town from the water. TR had already left, and there was nobody shooting from the water here in Santa Cruz. You know, there was still a couple guys shooting land, but like it was this dead area in Santa Cruz surf history where there wasn't really a good photographer here in town. And so everybody gravitated towards me because I was shooting water shots, and I did another submission to Surfer Magazine, and Adam Ripogo got the cover shot, and that was in 97, I think. And that was the moment that my career was catapulted. You know, I mean, once you get a cover shot, it's like, then everyone wants to shoot with you, because the opportunity to get a cover shot is as big as it gets in surfing, you know what I mean, for your career.
Totally. I mean, you got a poster and a cover.
Yeah, they were years apart, but it was like right around the same era, you know what I mean?
Do you remember what you got paid for the cover shot?
$1,100.
Sweet. Which is now a good payday once again.
But it's kind of like one of those things where, did I really make 1,100, or did I make, you know, $100,000? Because that turned into a reef trip and a Volcom trip back to back. And then, you know, I mean, and then it was like all of a sudden I was going to the Mentawais with Ozzy Wright, and you know, it was just like boom, 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 boom. And then I started working for Vans, and it was like it was all because of that. You know what I mean? It's right there. There's the cover shot. You can see it right there on the
Oh,
wall.
yeah. I remember the shot. So I do want to discuss all the career stuff that you just led into. We'll go back to it, but we skipped so much of your history that I think is really, really interesting. I want to hear more about Reunion Island because you mentioned that you went there, shot those photos, but you actually lived on Reunion,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
how did
Reunion was a huge phase in my life. So I lived in Maui, and I was working at Hobie Surf Shop in Lahaina. And this guy walked in, and I was like, holy shit, that guy's fucking cool looking. Am I allowed to swear on here?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I was like, that guy's cool looking. I'm going to go talk to him. So I went up there. The guy's wearing like African pants, like Senegalese pants. And like he had this like crazy like Rasta shirt on. And he had anyway, he was just one of those dudes I was magnetized to or whatever. So I went up, started talking to him, and he turned out he was from Senegal, West Africa, and one of my favorite bands at the time was from Senegal, and so I was like, we just had everything to talk about, and he was a surfer, and we started talking about everything from like where you grew up surfing to like anything. Anyway, we ended up being best friends, and so we spent 6 months in Maui together every day. And when I moved back to Santa Cruz, he came and visited me on his way back to France. And he had to go back to France because they make you do 2 years in military as a French citizen. So he went back to France, and somehow he got out of the military thing. And so he went straight to Reunion, like to celebrate. He got to Reunion, and he loved it, and so he never left, and he opened up a restaurant there. And so I know that was a long story, but it all leads into each other. And so at the same time he was opening up the restaurant, I had broken up with my girlfriend here, and it was like kind of devastating. And so I kind of just went on like a sell everything mission. So I sold everything that I owned, all my old skates and everything. Like I had just the classic skate collection, all these old, like I wish I had it now. And I don't know, I made $5,000 or $6,000, and I moved to Reunion to work in his restaurant. And so I got to Reunion, and he picked me up from the airport, and he already had a house lined up for me and everything, and right in San Lu where that classic left is. And the only problem is he got barred on his permits for his restaurant, so they never opened. Mm-hmm. So then I was like, okay, you know, I had $6,000 to live on, so I became very chintzy, and I'd just go, you know, grocery shopping and cook food, and that lasted a while. And then I figured out that I could swim out and shoot water shots and sell them to the traveling French surfers in Reunion. And so I started doing that. And then, you know, I ended up scoring the waves of my life there. Everyone was already, this is back a long time ago, but everyone was already scared of sharks there. And so I'd wake up at the crack of dawn and go down to San Lu, and nobody would surf from 6 to 8 in the morning. And so I'd surf by myself. And it was just this grinding, perfect left point break with huge barrels and nobody out. And so that totally changed my life, you know?
Yeah.
I'd surf that every morning by myself. And, you know, people, all the Creole and Reunionese and the Frenchies, they would be like, dude, you're crazy. You're crazy to surf out there by yourself at dawn. You know, that's the shark time, you know?
You're even crazier to swim it, to shoot photos.
Yeah, but it was survival. You know, I had no other way to eat food.
Yeah.
And,
What?
you know,
So
there were times when I had zero money, and like I was cooking potatoes and eating potatoes with no salt and no You know what I mean? That's all I had.
Gnarly. So what year would that have been?
In the 90s, I'm not sure, maybe 92, 93,
Early
94.
90s.
I'm
So
not sure
yeah, because
exact dates. I'd
I
have to
think
look at a slide. The slides have the dates on them.
right. So anybody who got into surfing the last 15 years may have never even heard of Reunion Island and that wave,
Yeah.
but there was, I think they even did an ASP event there at some
Yeah,
point in the
they
late
did.
90s, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and maybe that was even influenced by you having been there before and publishing some photos of there, because it's just kind of off Americans' map a little bit, you
Oh, it's
know?
way off the map. I was one of 2 Americans there on the island, you know what I mean? And so it was kind of cool. That was another cool thing. It's like I was the one with the accent. People were tripping on me. They're like, "Oh, you're famous on the island because you're American." You know what I mean? It's like, you know.
Yeah. Side note, whose boards were you riding?
I actually had a. Who was the guy that kind of pioneered uluwatu with Jerry Lopez and those guys?
Jim Banks.
Jim Banks. Yeah, that's what I had, a Jim Banks board.
Perfect for St. Lou.
Yeah, it was insane. It was like a 6.6 tri-fin. The thing just rode the barrel so good, and it was like the perfect board.
Yeah.
I had a few boards when I went over there. I broke them all, and then I ended up buying that one while I was there, and that was my main board. It just kind of, it had a really thick glass job, and it lasted throughout the whole time.
Amazing.
And it was magic. It was a magic board.
Yeah. Just I have very limited exposure to Reunion, mainly through the surf world, but everything that I've seen about it, it looks like a paradise.
Very, very cool place. So much history there, you know. I mean, the English and the French fought over that island for forever, and so there's cannons all the way around the island from back in the war days, and Mauritius is right off of the coast there.
That's right.
And so Mauritius is English and Reunion is French, and that's because of their battles back and forth. And there's a lot of history. And Reunion's one of the youngest islands in the world, and so it's still erupting. The volcano is still erupting there all the time. And there's a huge cone in the middle of the island where the original volcano was, and it's all tropical jungle down in there. And it's like people come from all over the world to do treks down into that middle of the furnace, they call it. And it's just an amazing place, you know. I bought a scooter when I got there, and I drove that scooter all the way around the island and just explored everything. You know, they have it's a very interesting place because it's influenced by Madagascar, Africa, India, and France. And then it's got the original culture of the 𝐍𝐞𝐥𝐬𝐿, which is Creole. So they have the most amazing food, the most amazing people. It's a perfect mesh. They have the most interesting looking people and beautiful people there ever. And so that's what makes it unique.
Yeah, amazing. Well, the reason it makes headlines in the last decade is because of the shark attacks.
Yeah.
Do you think that's more prevalent now, or is it just the news is reporting it more now?
It's way more prevalent now. I'm not sure if it got fished out. It's always been sharky there, mainly because it's the way the deep water comes up right to the island, and then it's right off South Africa. So they have every kind of shark there. They have Zambesis and great whites, but mainly tigers are the big problem. And now bull sharks. So the bull sharks are the big problem now, I think. And the tigers have always been a big problem there. And tigers are gnarly because they're territorial. And so they find a territory and they kind of stick to it, and they, you know, and so it's like
they defend it.
Yeah, some of the secret spots there, they have like tiger sharks that everyone knows that are named. You know, they have names for them. And but back when I lived there, there was a shark attack every other year, or maybe one every 3 years, or whatever. Now like the last time when they made surfing illegal, there was 13 or 14 fatalities in 1 year, or in less than a year.
Yeah.
It was like the first 8 months of the year there was 14 fatalities. So they made surfing completely illegal, and they put actually cops at every surf spot, and they wouldn't let you paddle out.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of in the middle of being illegal and them being a little bit lenient with it. So they have, like, my friend his dad has a surfing group, and they all go down there together, and they all paddle out together. And so 30 of them will paddle out at San Luis at the same time, and they just, kind of huddle together and surf. And it's the weirdest thing ever, because it's like the polar opposite of what you used to do. You want to surf by yourself or with one friend, now they want to surf in numbers. And I'm not sure if that helps or not, There's a million spots in Reunion, and a million really sick spots. There's a famous Tom Curran story of him surfing the next point up. It's called 𝐒𝐻𝐡𝐵𝐻, and it's this left. It's actually the same wave that I shot where I had my first spread in Surfing Magazine. That was 𝐒𝐻𝐡𝐵𝐻, and it's like this crazy shallow left that goes for half a mile, and it's just these massive barrels that just go for days. And if you fall, you're done, because it's so shallow. It's like literally like a foot or two deep, and it's just grinding 10-foot barrels going down the point. Anyway, there's some classic footage, I guess, somewhere of Tom Curran surfing that by himself.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Why'd you leave?
Oh, because I was shooting photos at this spot. It's a secret spot, so I'm not going to say the name, but I was shooting photos, and I came in and I took the film out. I brought it to go get processed, and I took my camera home, and I plugged in my motor drive charger, and I forgot to use the adapter, and it burnt my motor drive charger out. And so without that motor drive charger, I could only shoot like one more roll of film, and then my camera was dead. And without, you can't do it without it, And so, this is back in the day when, like, if I would have called someone to send me one, it would have took a month to get there, or a month and a half. People would send me packages from the United States with, like, little care packages of, like, whatever in it, food or whatever, and the date would be like a month and a half earlier when they sent it than when it got to me.
Right.
So It was a different world back then. So anyways, it was just, the writing was on the wall. I wasn't going to get anywhere there. I was barely surviving, so it was like, okay, I got my waves, I got my barrels, and my camera's toast. So I ended up just selling the camera there, kept the water housing, brought it home with me, but sold the camera, so I had enough money to get a plane ticket out and get home. And it was a good year in my life. It was crazy. Reunion is like, San Luis, that town is like the most majestic town ever, and it has a big amphitheater there. So they'd have these concerts where big reggae stars would come, or big bands from Africa, and they would play in this amphitheater, and it would echo through the valley and go straight out to San Luis. So we'd be out surfing like perfect 6-foot San Luis and just listening to this concert going on while we're, it was just amazing.
That is magical.
It's like surfing in an aquarium there. You can look down and like see all the fish. The fire coral is just glowing all these different colors of purple and orange, and you can see all the urchins and everything. It's just, it's like Barbados water. It's really, really clear and crazy.
Amazing. So back in Santa Cruz, let's get back to that career trajectory that you were talking about. You land a cover shot. What are the professional opportunities that present themselves after that?
So it was all exploding right around that time, you know, and I did like a couple of my first trips. Like I said, I did a trip to mainland Mexico for some big barrels, and I was shooting water shots down there. And I remember we flew back out of the airport out of Mexico into LAX, and boom, there was my cover. It was the first time I got to see it, and it was on all the newsstands in the airport. And it was
Wow.
like, that was a moment I'll never forget, you know what I mean? And so we were traveling, and then, you know, I got home, and it was like, it was kind of a big deal here too. Adam Repogel is probably, if not the most respected surfer in Santa Cruz history, one of them, you know? And so
Yeah.
it was big news here. And, you know, luckily for me, this is the time when Volcom had just started and Reef was blowing up with all their ads and their butt shots and all that stuff. And I had gotten really good at making friends with team managers, and I was really good with all my contacts and knowing where to send my slides, where they were most likely to get used. You know, I knew all the guys at Quicksilver and Reef and Volcom and all those companies down there. And so for me, I was already a natural hustler as it was. And so it was really easy for me to get on the phone and talk to all these people and find out what they needed. And they would call me and be like, hey, we're going to send up, you know, Bruce Irons. We're sending Bruce Irons over. We need you to shoot him for this. And, you know, I mean, it was like, it was just natural. It just happened naturally. It was really easy for me, you know, because I was addicted to photography. So I was ready to shoot any moment it was sunny. And B, I had just gotten sober, you know, this was almost 30 years ago. I had just gotten into that point of my life where things changed and my recovery became first in my life. And so I exchanged one addiction for another. And now my new addiction was the ocean and lighting and all that stuff. And anyway,
Well,
it just exploded.
can we dive into that a little bit? Because I know I've heard you talk about that with Tony and other people as well, but it seems to fly in stark. First of all, the addiction and the drug use is kind of synonymous with Santa Cruz, unfortunately, just because there's so many icons who have kind of fallen from due to that, you know?
Yes.
But so much of what you're talking about with the Maui experience and the reunion thing also feels the opposite of that. It feels bright and it feels like a healthy lifestyle. So, was it the move back to Santa Cruz that was?
I think I was an addict from a very young age, even though it wasn't to drugs.
Okay.
It was to something. And it was like, you know, for about 4 or 5 years of my life, it became an absolute nightmare. But for the rest of my life, it's actually been a good thing. You know, I mean, I got addicted to skateboarding, and you know, even before that, I was addicted to candy or whatever. It was like, whatever I'm interested in, I'm just straight addicted to, you know, and that's still the case. You know, now today it's golf. I'm addicted to golf. It's all I think about. It's all I want to do. You know what I mean? I've sat and looked at 6-foot perfect waves and been like, I'm going golfing. You know what I mean? It's just because that's what I want to do, you know? Anyway, to go back to your question, Santa Cruz is definitely synonymous. And I think since even before I was alive, there's been a lot of drugs here. You know, Pleasure Point was a hot spot back in the day for hookers and heroin, you know what I mean? And that's how it got the name Pleasure Point. You know, there was, oh shoot, my battery's gonna die.
Oh yeah.
Can I go grab my charger?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Oh, we're good now. Okay.
Sweet. So Pleasure Point.
So anyway, you know, when I moved here, I started partying immediately, but it didn't become a problem until later, and then it became a real problem. You know, you start surfing less, you start shooting less photos, you start skating less, and then, you know, the attraction that was just like all of my friends were in the same boat, you know. It was like we all graduated together to this new level of partying that wasn't really partying anymore. It was just abusing. So, well, I don't know. Was there more questions to that?
Yeah, I guess the part that I'm always interested in is so many people use, and I'm curious when you identify the difference between using and abusing, because a lot of people will rationalize to themselves, I'm not abusing, I'm still going to work every morning, or my, you know, my
Yeah.
wife and I are still together, whatever the rationality is, but it might look like abuse from the outside looking in. So I'm just curious personally when you identify that difference. And then the second
Yeah.
thing is when you identify the point that you need to stop.
For me, it was obvious. You know, I was lucky because I am such a gnarly addict to everything that I do. It's like I have this really funny level of like, I'm either really interested in something or I'm not interested in it at all. You know, I'm really addicted to something or else I don't care at all about it. And so anything that I'm interested in, I'm usually addicted to. And for me, it was, you know, when it became drugs and alcohol, it was like, took me to the curb fairly fast. And there was no doubt that it was a problem. And, you know, and so I didn't have to wonder. You know, it was just like all or nothing, you know.
When you said there was no doubt that it was a problem, can you say more? Like a lot of people
Yeah, I mean, I
won't
was
identify.
losing weight, my hair was falling out, like
So it was a
I was
health
losing
problem.
friends. Uh, I owed everyone money. I would avoid Pleasure Point because I owed everyone money. I mean, it's just on and on. You know, I sold my car for it.
Gotcha.
Riding around on a bike, you know, I mean, it was just like all that stuff that you can. For a while, I was defensive with people. They'd be like, I think you got a problem. I'd be like, nah, I'm fine. You know what I mean? But that didn't last long. That was like a very short period. And then it was like, I was off to the races, and it was, how long can I live doing this? You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
And, you know, at one point I rode my bike downtown, and I still see there's the payphone's actually still there that I used. I called my sister, Kim, who I'm really close with, and I just said, I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? Like, I was at rock bottom. And she said, ride your bike up to the new life center and check yourself in. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay. And so that's what I did. I rode my bike up there. I remember throwing my bike in that bike rack, walking in there, and that was kind of the beginning of the end for me. You know what I mean? And luckily for me, they have a really good program there where really good counseling, really good meetings, relapse prevention classes, and a guy who runs the program who knows his shit, and he's willing to call you out on your stuff. And he did. He called me out all the time. He'd be like, hey, Nelly, what'd you do for your recovery today? You know what I mean? I'd be like, I'd list off all the stuff. He's all, what'd you do for someone else other than yourself? And I'd be like, oh, and he'd be like, it's not working, dude. He's all, it's easy to do stuff for yourself. It's easy to do stuff. It's easy to be selfish. I want to hear what you did for someone else today. Like, what did you do to help someone else? You know what I mean? And like, he got me into that mindset of like, it's not all about you all the time. And so the next time he asked me, I made sure that I had some ammo. I made sure that I had done some nice stuff for someone else today, whether it was paying for someone else's gas, or giving someone $1 on the street, or giving someone a ride, or something for someone other than myself. And that way of thinking has stuck with me since those days, which is, you know, awesome, because it's like, It's even on my Instagram page. If you read it, you know, and do something, what does it even say? I don't even remember anymore, but it says
I remember,
something to that effect. And it's like, that's how I try to live my life, where do something kind for someone else today. That's what it says. And that's kind of, you know, I'm not perfect, far from perfect, but
yeah.
I'm always thinking about like trying to, you know, like I love waking up at 5 a.m. and going to get creamer for my wife because we don't have any creamer, so that she has creamer for her coffee in the morning. I love anything like that. Anytime that I have the opportunity to do something for someone else where it's going to make them stoked, I love that more than anything. I live for that shit.
Can you explain why that's an important part of the process?
Because that's how the world works. Otherwise, the world doesn't work. And it makes me sick to see people think that they're killing it because their family's killing it and their family's safe and their family's going to college and it's like, dude, it's easy. It's easy to do stuff for yourself and for your family. It's when you reach out and you start sponsoring a kid in Ethiopia who's starving, or like, that's the real stuff. You know, I mean, your family's going to be fine and you're going to be fine. As soon as you figure out that it's not all about that, that's the most rewarding thing. And it's like, until you start doing it, you'll never find those rewards. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm very adamant about that kind of stuff, and kind of like to a fault, maybe, you know?
I can see it though. I wouldn't have necessarily identified that as being a super important part of the process, but now that you're explaining it, it's evident like if you are abusing yourself through the addiction, there's a lack of self-esteem or self-worth. But if you realize that other people around you are dependent upon you and that
Yeah.
you are holding them up, and that if you're not there, they're not going to be able to survive necessarily or thrive, then it really does elevate your own self-esteem.
Yeah. And it's just a really good feeling when, because we're human beings are selfish. That's just the way we were built. And the reward you get when you finally figure out that it feels good to be not selfish for a while, or even if it's 5 minutes a day that you
Yeah.
spend doing something that's not for yourself, that's really rewarding. And I don't know, like you said, like to go through the kind of addiction that I had and to come through the other side, I feel like I owe it to, you know what I mean? It's like I owe it to my family, and I owe it to other people. You know, I mean, I go to a lot of meetings. I sponsor a lot of other addicts and try to help them through their addiction and stuff like that. And it's a huge part of my life now. You know what I mean?
Good.
I work with, yeah, I mean, my daughter just went to her first meeting with me. And I remember going to get my 10-year chip with her when she was a baby. Or maybe it wasn't 10-year chip anyway, it was a big chip, and I went to go get it, and I was just bawling, you know what I mean, holding her as a baby and knowing that like I had a second chance in life. And
Yeah.
I'll never, that stuff, I hold it really, really close to me, because it's, without my recovery, I'm nothing, and it's given me every single opportunity that I have in life, and yeah, that's just how I feel.
Well, it's impressive that through the rock bottom phase, you were able to maintain connections in the surf industry so that when you
I
were
wasn't.
ready.
Oh no, I wasn't.
Okay. Well,
Oh
when you
no.
were ready to bounce back, though, you still had.
Yeah, I was super streetwise. You know what I mean? I didn't have a lot of book smarts, but I was very wise in how I was able to connect with people around the world, and save their numbers. And you know, I had black books. I had many, many black books full of numbers, addresses, emails, all that stuff, before there was phones and this, you know, like all these different stuff that you have today. I was really good at that. And so that stuff all came back really quick. But during that 4 years, of hard addiction, I was the most dysfunctional human ever. You know what I mean?
Well, to be able to transition the addiction into surf photography and be able to make a career out of it is an impressive rebound.
Thanks. That was part of the miracle. You know what I mean? It was part of there was, it was a perfect storm of events that happened to make my career what it was. You know what I mean? It was A, me being an addict, B, TR having my back, giving me insight in how the surf industry worked and how photography and how what was more valuable and why being a water photographer was a trillion times more valuable than anybody can stand on the beach and shoot photos. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
My grandpa can do it. My daughter can do it. Anyone can do it, but not everyone can go swim out at Pipeline and shoot photos. You know, very few people can actually. You know what I mean? And at that time, worldwide, there was only like 60 guys that were getting all the photos published in all the international publications, all the international advertisements. They were all. It was a very small group of us. Now it's massive because of digital photography and everything. But back then, there wasn't that many. And so everybody knew who everyone was. Everyone had their position out at, you know, you had your spot. And when you swam Pipeline, it was like everyone knew where, you know, guys like Scott 𝐈𝐬𝐿 were like pole position. And then there was a chain of guys, you know what I mean, where you knew your position and you stayed with it, you know what I mean? You stuck where you belonged.
Yeah.
Basically.
So just to recap and kind of paint the context for the listener, Santa Cruz had incredible talent in the water and surfing, and TR kind of cultivated some of that and then built inroads into the industry. He moved down to Costa Rica. So there was that void of like, these surfers have sponsors. Those sponsors need photos, video, content.
Yes.
And there's an opportunity for you, obviously, to connect the dots between the media waiting for these imagery and these guys wanting to obviously service their sponsors' obligations and build their profile. So you're there perfectly positioned. Plus, you have the water experience from being a surfer. Plus, you have the talent behind the lens as a photographer.
And the skate experience. And like when skating at that time was all about fisheye photography. And so it was like basically getting as close as you possibly could to the skateboard or the skater while keeping the coping in the photograph, but being as close as you could to, you know, see their face or see their eyes or you know, a guy doing a one-footed air where his foot's practically touching the lens of the camera and stuff like that. That stuff all came naturally to me and TR. The other part of the story of what exactly right along the lines of what you're talking about is TR made the conscious decision that he didn't want to surf in a wetsuit anymore. He didn't want to surf in the crowds anymore. He wanted to find his own piece of paradise. He found it in Costa Rica. He was able to buy land down there. And he made this trade-off. He knew he was doing it because he had already exploded surfing in Santa Cruz. And so there was a huge future for him here. He was willing to make that trade. And I'm so happy for him because he went down there, bought the land that he wanted, surfed the waves uncrowded that he wanted, discovered spots, still kills it at photography. But he made the trade of like, you know, and he raised a beautiful daughter down there. But he was willing to make that trade to be a surfer and a skater for the rest of his life. He still rips so hard, and I got the reward of staying here, and I got the reward of following in his footsteps and getting to work with all these surfers that he had blown up, and then creating new ones along the way. I helped to create different people's careers after that, but he gave me that gift, you know what I mean? And I'll never forget that, you know.
Well, the other thing that fits into this story is the magazines were in their heyday and thriving, and so they were obviously earning a lot of money, being able to spend a lot of money on photography, and then new magazines were born, and one of those was Trans World Surf.
Yeah.
So can you tell me about the opportunity that itself with that?
Yeah. So shortly after the surfing pull-out poster that I was mentioning, and the stuff started to, like, I was basically, after that, I was on trip after trip after trip, and then I got the cover of Adam Repogel, Surfer, and so Surfing was kind of bummed that I had sent photos to Surfer while they were paying my film and processing costs and stuff, but they had never really given me much money. You know what I mean? They were giving me, I think, $500 a month. And I said, dude, I can't survive off $500 a month. You know what I mean? But I went down and had a meeting with them, and Flame was like, dude, you haven't proven yourself yet. We'll give you a raise when it's time. And I'm like, well, I can't survive, so I'm going to keep putting submissions everywhere. You know, you're not paying me enough money. Anyway, Transworld was born. The editor of Transworld flew up here. We went out to dinner, and he said, I'll triple that amount of money that they're paying, and we will pay for all your film and processing, and we'll get you on the best trips with the best surfers. And I said, okay, done. So I called Surfing. I told them, I said, I'm going with Transworld. And that was the beginning of a different era where it was like I wrote my own ticket. You know what I mean? It was like wherever I wanted to go, you know, and I started going. I went to the Mentalize, and then shortly after I went straight to 𝐶𝐞𝐥𝐬𝐿. Flew my family over to 𝐶𝐞𝐥𝐬𝐿, and my daughter was like 2 months old, I think, at the time, or 4 months old, my wife, and you know, started to get to experience all of my dreams, you know what I mean? And it was like, you know, I think in 1 year I went to Tahiti twice, Fiji, South Africa, Australia, and got to work with, you know, all my favorite surfers. And it was amazing, you know. And then shortly after that is when I started shooting a lot of flash stuff. And then that created a new maelstrom of stuff, because, you know, we were the first people to use slaves in the water, and we started using colored gels and stuff and creating this imagery that no one had ever seen. And so the international media picked up on that and started publishing. I just got, you know, Japanese covers and European covers and Australian covers, and like it definitely helped to get my name out there as a photographer that people wanted to work with, you know. And we ended up doing different campaigns. You know, I did an O'Neill campaign that was pure flash. It was their whole year of clothing and wetsuits was all flash, and that all came from that era of shooting with multiple flashes in the water.
Yeah, that's one thing Tony said about you as well. When I was talking to him about this conversation, he was like, you know, Nelly didn't invent flash photography, but he's definitely taken it further than anybody else in the surf world.
Yeah.
So, but that's
Cool.
what I remember. Go ahead.
Just to hear, you know what I mean? It's like, sometimes it feels like I'm talking about someone else, you know what I mean? Because I have like this insecurity of like talking about myself, but it's cool to hear TR say something like that, you know what I mean? It's like, it's funny to have your hero saying nice things about you. You know, it just feels good.
Well, from my experience, just being a young kid, subscribing to all the magazines and gobbling up as much content as I could, Transworld hit with a big splash for those reasons that you're talking about. It was like innovative and new style of imagery that I hadn't seen before. Plus, it was infused by all that skate style surfing that was just kind of on the, I don't know, periphery of so much of the traditional surf magazines. It was what was driving Transworld. So it just came in with so much new, fresh, raw energy. And I don't know what the circulation was like back in those days, like how it compared to the mainstream or the established magazines. But for me, it landed and it was right alongside Surfer and Surfing from day one, you know?
Yeah, it was cool. It definitely pushed aerial surfing to a new level for sure. I mean, there was definitely issues that was like 99% airs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And from a decade earlier where aerials were kind of out, and it was like they were getting written off. People were like, that's not surfing. I mean, rail surfing's surfing. And the cool thing is that it created a spot for aerial surfing, and then it became accepted, and now it's almost come full circle where a good rail turn is as good as an air, or an air is as good as they're all good.
Yeah.
And people are doing like the Stab High event that they just did. It's like some of the stuff these guys are doing now is like wild. It's like sometimes I'll see one with Matt Miola Air or whoever, and I'm like, what?
I
Like
know.
crazy stuff, where they're just upside down flipping.
Well, it's so technical and gnarly that you can't even identify what they're doing necessarily on the first run. Like you have to go slow-mo it and watch it
Yeah,
back. You're like, oh, I didn't even see that grab right there, you know?
no, it's a beautiful thing. I have to give credit to part of the Flash era was my assistant Corey Hansen was as frothing as me, not only to get his name out there, but also he was willing to come every single evening to my house in case it was on.
Mm.
Because if he's not there, we can't do it. And so, like I was talking about earlier in our podcast, it's a very shooting water shots with pro surfers and an assistant, and having the waves cooperate and be good for flash photography, because like good waves aren't necessarily good for flash photography. It has to be perfect. Everything has to be perfect, because Corey's got to be in the flats. I have to be on the corner. Both flashes have to go off at the same time. The lighting has to be perfect. It can't be too light. It can't be too dark. I mean, you get like a 15-minute window in the morning and the evening to shoot flash.
Yeah.
That's it. Otherwise, it's too bright or it's too dark. You know what I mean? And so the way we were able to get those photos is by doing it night after night after night after night after night after night after night. Every night we did it. And so that's how we were able to create some of those images. And you shoot 24, or we'd shoot 36 photos, a roll of film, and you'd get one crazy one. Sometimes you'd get none, and
Mhm.
sometimes you'd get five. You know what I mean? But like, I look through my slide table now, and there's like literally thousands of flash shots that I consider keepers. Do you know how many nights and years that took to get those 2,000 images? It was like 10 years or 8 years straight of like frothing and shooting it every morning and every evening. And I don't have that froth anymore, but I did then. And I'm
Yeah.
glad I did, because now I have the stuff that I can use forever. And it's cool.
Well, earlier you mentioned it's sad the magazines have gone away. I don't know if you've seen, but just in the last week or two, well, the last week, Surfer magazine came back in print.
I know. I'm curious about that. Was that a one-off, or is that like permanent? Is it going to be monthly? Is it going to be quarterly? Like, what's the story there? And I'm going to
It's
actually
yeah,
ask Chachi and find out what the story is.
it's a great question. It's definitely not a one-off, but I wouldn't go far as to say it's permanent. It's a test run for sure. But I don't know if it's going to be monthly or quarterly or what, but this has been a bigger play for them. The company was obviously purchased a couple years ago, and more recently they've had a reinvestment in content creation. So a lot of it is digital, but
Yeah.
they're also bringing back the print. Um, but I think the only way that the print can thrive is if they're actually paying photographers, like there's a real opportunity here for a reinvestment in this old model, modernizing it. But, I can't imagine it working if they're asking photographers just to donate photos, or we're only going to pay you a small sum of money or whatever. There
Yeah.
needs to be an actual investment for the photographers who are shooting photos to submit the photos for print rather than publishing online.
Yeah. I know that at the end of the published magazine's time, Surfer was the last one. It was just Todd Glazer and Chachi. They were the only two photographers left on the thing. And I know that Grant Ellis was publishing, and now he's Surfer's Journal's publisher. I mean, he's the chief of Surfer's Journal now. So I'm curious to know whether they have a new editor in chief, or
I think
you
Jake
know,
Howard is
is that who it is?
running the print. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But I don't know who the photo editor is though. But
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to find out. I know Chachi's got something to do with it for sure, because they just sent him to Tahiti to cover all that stuff for Surfer. So
yeah, he'll have the full scoop for you.
yeah,
Um,
he's an amazing photographer.
yeah.
Chachi is the new generation of madmen. It's cool to see another
So
guy from Santa Cruz come out, and like he'll do 10-hour days out of pipeline. I mean, he comes in, he's just shriveled, and you're just like, dude, you're gnarly.
so let's transition into, how does a surf photographer make a living now as a surf photographer if there isn't print magazines? And then what is your transition? What does your career transition look like if
Can
you're not shooting as much surf photography?
can I pause for 1 sec?
Yep.
Okay.
Bathroom break.
All right, so what was your question? How does a surf photographer make a living these days?
Yeah. And then secondly, as you've transitioned kind of away from shooting surfing, how do you make that transition in a living?
Uh, so for myself, I've had to piece together a living through many, many different factions, I guess. I mean, still some of my living comes from surf photography. I still shoot photos for 𝐒𝐮. I submit photos to Surfer's Journal. I got my most recent cover shot and my first Surfer's Journal's cover, this one of Nathan Fletcher, that came in the mail. That was a huge surprise. You know what I mean? I didn't
Epic.
know, which was cool. It was like back to the beginning. I was like, wow, like this showed up on my doorstep, and I opened the envelope, and I was like, went and woke my wife up at like 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, I got the cover.
Wow.
Anyway, so some of that stuff still happens, you know. Get an occasional job for Red Bull or whoever in the surf industry. It's mainly non-endemic companies that you can make decent money off of. But for me, I started doing prints on metal and all my world travels and photos of lineups and beautiful sunrises and sunsets and lighthouses and whales and dolphins and turtles and this and that. I created a hat company. So I have my own hat company where I sell all the hats to the different stores around here. I work with a company, Merge 4 Socks. They use my photos on their socks. I have to say my biggest living comes from making prints for people's houses. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of my everyday job, where it's like, you make a metal print and you sell a big metal print for someone's house that can be thousands of dollars. You know what I mean? So it's kind of
Right.
the new cover shot for me. Um,
Yeah.
but every photographer has their own way. Some photographers just shoot random surfers and they sell them to the surfers, which is kind of how I started off.
Yeah.
Before I was shooting the pros, I was shooting random surfers and they would give me $20 for a photo.
Yeah.
Um, it's constantly changing and metamorphosizing into something else. And you know, it's a good thing to be passionate about, because if you're passionate, you can make a living doing photography, and if you're not passionate, you have zero chance. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
So
Passion and hustle.
passion and hustle.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm
like
curious with all.
this is a shirt that one of the golf companies used. It's one of my
Oh,
photos of Pipeline. They changed the photo and cropped it so that it's just lines, you know.
yeah.
And it's a shot I took a Pipeline back in the day. So
Wow.
it's stuff like that, you know. You get $500 here and $1,000 there, and you piece together a living, you know.
Yeah.
And some years have been tight, some years have been weird, and some years have been, you know, crushing it.
I'm curious with all the travel. Can you identify the best surfing that you've ever witnessed?
The very best session I ever witnessed, super obvious to me. It was a trip I did with John to Pass. And it was me, John, his younger brother, Nathan, Dane Gadaskus, and Tanner Gadaskus. And we went for a swell event in Micronesia. There was this massive swell coming. And we flew out there, and the first day was fun. The second day was a little bigger, and then the third day was the one. We drove out there at the crack of dawn. It was too low tide. It was the tidal equinox, and so we ended up going and surfing another wave down the way, and then coming back. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. We rolled back up to Pass, and it was the swell had, while we were at the other spot, the swell had gotten gigantic. And we were rolling up on the wave. We were like 100 yards away, and John jumped off the boat with his board and his leash and paddled out by himself. And I was like looking out there like, wow, like he's a nutcase, because A, we haven't even seen it yet, and we don't know how big it is yet. And this wave gets crazy. You know, I don't know if you know Pass very well, but it has a bunch of step ladders in it. And he paddled out there by himself, and we all sat in the boat and watched, and I was shooting, and I was like, oh, I knew that they wanted a water shot of John for the cover, and I knew I was going to have to swim. And so I was like watching it, and I was scared. And then we just all sat in the boat, me, Nathan, Dane, and Tanner sat in the boat and watched John put on the gnarliest display of surfing I've ever seen still to this day. It was like, he probably got 18 to 25 perfect, humongous stand-up barrels in a row, never fell once, was taking off under the lip, like paddling up the face of the wave, turning around under the lip, taking off in the barrel, and then just hooking it, and then getting 8-second stand-up barrels and getting spit out, and then paddling back out as fast as he could go. It was like John in his prime, fiending as hard as he could fiend, because he's definitely one of those kids that like I watched grow up, and no one psychs to go surfing more than John in the whole world. There's not one person. You know what I mean? And so he was fiending, and he was adrenalized, and he knew that this was the swell of all swells at Pass. And he put on a display of surfing like I've never seen anyone. You know, it was just amazing.
How old was he?
So this is when he won his first pipe event. It was like the week after we got home from this trip. I don't know what year that was. It was probably somewhere around 12, 15 years ago. It was when we got our first cover shot. You know, I started working with John when he was like 6 years old, and we traveled together because I shot for Vans. We traveled together for all those years, all the way up until we got that first cover shot. So I could find it. It's somewhere here.
No,
right here.
So
find out what year it was.
No, it's okay. what were those other guys doing waiting on the boat while John was putting on that display?
They were sizing the swell up and seeing what was going on. Because it was
after John gets
still,
5.
Yeah, it was borderline too low tide still. There was like 10 different lips in the wave, and it had grown from like 6 feet to like 15 feet since we had been gone at that other spot. So knowing that there was no one else there was no one else coming, there was no reason not to sit and watch it and assess what was really going on out there, because this is a dangerous, shallow spot, especially when it's breaking like it was. But John didn't care, and John had so much self-confidence that he could handle it, because he grew up on the beach at Pipe. You know, I mean, he had as crazy a poundings as you could ever get, and he knew he was capable, A, of holding his breath, B, of getting pounded and not panicking. You know, the whole thing about getting pounded is not panicking, and when you don't panic, you can always get through it, you know what I mean? And he knew that if his leash broke, he could swim back to the boat. And like, anyway, in his brain, he was fine.
Yeah.
In our brain, we were like, I want to watch this for a little while before I make my decision, you know?
Yeah. Does footage of that session exist anywhere?
Yeah. Reagan has the footage of that session, all of the waves.
But was it published anywhere?
Probably Vans used some of it. I don't know. There was like a media onslaught at that time. And then also the pick and choose, you know what I mean? Like maybe they ran one of the waves. There was definitely, I've never seen like this was the craziest session ever and run the whole thing on YouTube. It should have been done, you know? This was before the current media of like editing everything down and doing interviews and editing that in with it and talking about the session. Like this was before that era. Of the today's era of like, you know.
Yeah.
I think Nathan was really young at this time too. He was like 13 or 14 years old. So, I don't know.
Yeah, Nathan
just turned 30, right? So that yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
It was probably 13 years ago. He was probably 17 or 18 years old, I think.
Nathan took a little while to mature up to that level, you know, but Nathan definitely now is searching for waves like that.
No, Nathan is probably the gnarliest. I mean, arguably the gnarliest in the world, you know, and that's not like dissing, you know, Ian Walsh and Shane Dorian and Kai Lenny and whatever. But as far as like someone dedicating their life and every month of the year to it, Nathan's number one, I'd say, in the world.
Totally. Yeah, I would agree.
Riding giant slams and have giant slabs and having the right boards and dedicating, you know, I don't know how much money he spent last year to get to win Surfer of the Year, but it was in the hundreds of thousands, you know what I mean? And like making sure that he had all the right boards for all those Ireland slabs and all that stuff that he rode last year. We went to his movie this last winter on the in Waikiki. Him and Koa Rothman and all the boys, they put together this video, and then Nathan's part was in it, and it was just mind blowing. Like it was mind blowing. Like to watch his part and what he did last year was. I don't know if it'll ever be done again. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's just, you know, I don't even know where some of those waves were that he rode, but there were some parts where he was on like a 10-foot gun, free falling into these humongous left slabs and like getting barreled.
I know.
On like 𝐌𝐚𝐸 size boards. You know what I mean? No one's ever done that, you know, maybe Shane Dorian at Jaws. And stuff like that, paddling into that stuff, Billy Kemper and those guys. But like, this was these waves had never seen that I've seen anyways, 30,
That's
40-foot faces got free falling in on 10-foot guns into these barrels. It was wild.
It is. And that's what's, I think, distinctly different about him is watching him navigate the barrel
Yeah.
on a board that big. It's not just pointing and shooting. There's a wave from last year that I don't think they officially said where it was, so I won't either, but it's a right. And it's like he kind of knifes in on the thing. Foam ball gets kind of shot up under the board. He navigates over that and he's actually pumping the 9-foot gun through the thing. And
Yeah.
he rides out of it. And it's like, and like you said, that's incredible. But then there's 15 other waves from last year, different locations, rights and lefts, where he's doing the same thing. So it's never been done before. He documents it more thoroughly than anybody else as well. And then what's crazy is he publishes pretty quickly to his own
Yeah.
platforms.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different breed of that work ethic, the talent, the photographer, the all of it coming together into its
And the
own
research
media house.
of knowing where to go with all those guys,
Totally.
Yeah. It's amazing, their crew, him and Eli Olson and Koa and John I mean, look at that list of guys. First of all, the talent there, but just their stoke, they're just like, they're the raddest crew. It's so fun to watch, what I mean? And they all go their different directions, but like they all froth off of each other's energy. And then you add Kalani Rivero and, Noah Beshin into the mix and all these guys. And it's just like, it's so rad that they're not competing with each other. Instead, they're blowing each other up and they're helping each other turn into these like worldwide legendary surfers, what I mean? And they all have their own specialty, what I mean?
Yep. Yeah,
like
it's
no one
because
rides the barrel better than Koa Rothman, but he'll never win a CT event ever,
right.
100% guarantee that. But dude, the guy is so talented. It's like, did you see his wave from 𝐿𝐸 or that?
Yeah.
Like wild. Like I'm so happy for him and to, to get to know him when he was really young and then to get to see him get this wave right here at Chopes, like that was like one of the highlights of my life to see him get that wave and to see the look on his face. He was like 16 years old when he got that. Anyway, it's just those are the rewards that I've gotten by being a surf photographer and to be a surfer. And like yourself, we're fans, we're huge fans of these guys. And I remember Nathan Florence's first session out at Mavericks. He didn't even go on a wave. It was like me and John and Nathan went out on a ski together. And John paddled out, and Nathan was really young, and he sat in the channel and just sat and studied. And he was just, I could see he was just studying. It was the same day Shane Dorian went over the falls and scorpioned on that massive wave and almost drowned, what I mean? And it was like, it's pretty cool to see a guy of Nathan's caliber today that didn't even try to paddle into a wave that however many years ago that was, because he just wanted to study and see what was going on. And then he just sucked it all in and went, okay, that's who I want to be. What I mean? And that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to be this, it's amazing to watch Kai Lenny and the like Laird Hamilton like set the stage for these guys, and all these guys. It's just amazing to watch what's happening in surfing today.
Yeah, it really
media
is.
or no media, it's just amazing to see. I mean, there's especially those North Shore guys. It's like there's so many of them. Kalani Chapman and Jamie O'Brien and all these guys, like they are not scared. They're not scared. They'll go out in any size, closing out 𝐒𝐬𝐿𝐸. They don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your current relationship like with surfing?
What do you mean?
Are you,
And love surfing.
how often are you
How
surfing
often
and
do
all
I
that
surf?
stuff?
Only when it's good. I surf a lot of surf ranch. I work at the. That's another one of my many jobs I piece together to make a living. I work at the surf ranch, and so I get waves out there, you know.
What
And
is that? So tell me more about that job. You just, they call you and say somebody hired a photographer for this given day, or?
yes and no. I mean, most of my jobs come from people that have contacted me, and I kind of got grandfathered into some different groups of people.
Gotcha.
And it sounds dreamy, but a lot of it is just like back in the day where, like I'd go to the Mentawais. I didn't surf the whole time. I was sitting in a dinghy shooting photos in 100-degree heat. People thought I was like, "Oh, you're going to the Mentawais? That's so sick." I'm like, actually, it's kind of a lot of work, and it's not like being a surfer on a boat trip. You know what I mean? You're working.
Yeah.
So this is a lot of that, but it's the best job in the world. You get to go, and everyone's on their bucket list day. A lot of the people that go to the surf ranch, they go once. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And they want photos, and I get to be around that energy of people having the day of their life. You know what I mean? It's probably the opposite of being a dentist. You know what I mean? Where like you get to be around this energy of like people having the best day of their life. That wave is ridiculous. It goes really, really fast, and it's really, really fun. It's usually really, really glassy, and it's rippable, and it's barreling.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I get to surf there occasionally. I surf out front of my house here at 26th Avenue quite often, definitely not on the froth like I was when I was a kid where I had to surf every day. That's not me anymore.
Yeah.
But if it's like 6 feet or, I surf a lot of little wind and sea out here. It's like, if it's 6 feet or 8 feet and barreling are good, I'm out there, If there's zero part of me that wants to drive up to Waddell and surf 1 to 2 foot south swell. Like I could
Right.
care less. I'd way
Yeah.
rather go golf. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Very good. Well, final question is, whose boards are you riding nowadays?
Oh, let's see. I have some of lots of people have a stretch. I have a Firewire. I have a Channel Islands, and I have a galley, Chris Gallagher.
I've got a galley too.
Yeah, Galley was my hero growing up. He was one of my best friends. We'd go surf. We'd go night surfing at Pleasure Point at like midnight, and we'd drink a huge batch of coffee and paddle out. And it was, even in those days, it was the only time you could surf the point by yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we laugh about it now because like there's zero chance either one of us would go do that now.
Yeah.
But back then, full moon surfing was a thing, and anyway, yeah, I have lots of boards. I have long boards. My daughter surfs. My wife surfs occasionally. We all surf together, especially in Hawaii. And Nathan Fletcher's probably my biggest surf partner over there, and Liam McNamara. And so, we have all these little nooks and crannies we like to go. And if it's not big enough, we go longboard, especially me and Nathan. Liam's kind of over that. He's kind of like me here, where it's like, if it's not good, he's not going out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of a ride everything guy.
Yeah.
I did surf a lot in Hawaii this year. I surfed probably like 90 days in a row.
Good.
And I put the golf clubs down, and I just frothed out on surfing, and felt good, But then coming home, it's like, is it really worth putting a wetsuit on? And, it's got to be worth it for me.
I know, that's the way I feel too. It's like, there was a decade where I felt guilty going through the process of not surfing as much, but I've relinquished the guilt, and it's like, just pick and choose your days. It has to be good,
Yeah. You guys got a good swell. That last swell didn't even make it here. Like, we got nothing here. It was not even a ripple.
Yeah, I know.
Nathan actually called me, and he's like, dude, it's like 6 feet in Huntington at least. Like, you better go look at it again. There's got to be waves. And I'm like, I went down the street and looked at it. It was like not even breaking. It just was too south for here.
Exactly. Yeah. Very good. Well, hey man, it's phenomenal to finally connect with you.
Yeah, I'm
And
super stoked. Thanks, Dave.
thrilled to, man. And I really appreciate your candor and sharing all this too.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, man.
Okay, we'll talk
All
soon.
right.
Serve Splendor.